Welcome back to the channel. I love arcade games. I have a lot of good memories playing them. I was lucky enough that I grew up as a kid during the 90s and witnessed the second renaissance of arcade games and got to experience quite a lot, from the rise of the fighting games to the later era that saw a lot of 3D gaming. Luckily enough, I got to experience some 80s classics too. Fast forward to 2022, and the Nintendo Switch has been blessed with a number of ways to play a boatload of arcade games, from the late 70s all the way into the 2000s. So it's no surprise that I would have a number of these for the console, and I got quite a few favorites. In today's video, I'm going to share with you a selection of my favorite arcade games on the Switch. While you are watching, feel free to share what your favorite arcade games are in the comments down below. I got a lot to talk about, so enough dawdling, grab a quarter and a slice of pizza, and let's dive into some arcade goodness on the Nintendo Switch. If we're going to talk about some arcade games, then of course, I'm going to talk about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection that just came out. Why? Well, because it has two of my favorite beat-em-ups of all time. Yes, it has Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles the arcade game from 1989 and Turtles in Time. Turtles was all the rage in the early 90s, from the comics to the TV show, movies, the toys. Oh, I remember the toys. Kinda wish I still kept them. Anyway, the first arcade game captured that spirit in time, and it was a bit mind-blowing as a very young kid to play. 4-player beat-em-up. 4 people playing at once on an arcade cab. Nothing was like that at the time. It blew my mind. The game is a lot of fun, and guess what? It still is. What's cool about the new collection is the ability to play 4-player via online or local multiplayer and be able to relive that classic arcade experience. Seriously, get some friends and play it in 4-player. While it is fun solo, it is a blast in 4-player play. Now, Turtles in Time is the one I have the most experience with. I played it a lot in the arcade. It is objectively the best of the two. It has far improved graphics and gameplay, and for myself, might be the best arcade beat-em-up ever made. Nothing has ever touched it, between the spot-on gameplay and the nostalgia factor for me. Maybe the new Shredder's Revenge game, but hey, that was never in the arcades. This one featured the return of 4-player multiplayer, just like the previous game, and you can experience that again via this collection. It is one of the best arcade experiences you can get on your Switch. If you have nostalgia for the 80s and 90s era of Turtles, make sure to pick up this new collection, as it has these 2 games, plus a slew of console and Game Boy games too. It's a pretty sweet collection. Now I'm going to hop from one collection to another one, and that being Pac-Man Museum Plus. Now, I always have had a soft spot for Pac-Man, and that's probably because my late mother was a huge Pac-Man fan. She didn't play a lot of games, but she loved Pac-Man, especially Miss Pac-Man. So I got exposed to those games early on via her. On this collection, there's many ways to get your Pac-Man on. There's one game that I really like. You might be surprised to hear. I really like Super Pac-Man. Now, this game was the first true sequel to the original game by Namco, with Miss Pac-Man being Midway's take. Here in Super Pac-Man, Pac-Man now has the ability to grow and supersize, as well as be able to eat a power pellet like normal. You have to collect fruit and keys to open pathways in the maze. The Super Power-Up allows Pac-Man to also bust through doors, so it can be used strategically to get through some tricky parts of the maze. For whatever reason, I've always gravitated towards this game. I'm decently good at it. Each time I play, I'm able to get through many boards at a time without dying, so that's always a plus. I guess for me, it's just an exciting take on the formula without being too crazy or far removed from it. Anyway, I'm glad to see it here as part of the collection with the other Pac-Man games. It's good stuff. Check out the collection if you haven't yet. The SNK 40th Anniversary Collection is a very good collection of arcade and console games from SNK before their famed Neo Geo era. One of the coolest things about the collection is on the Switch, it received a free DLC update that added a really cool light gun game called Beast Busters. You don't see too many light gun games get console ports these days, so it was really cool to see this come out. Beast Busters is a game where you shoot up hordes of zombies, left and right. It is a pretty intense game. It was released in the arcades in 1989, so this was right on the cusp of the Neo Geo era, and you can kind of see that in the graphics. Of course, in this version, you have to use the joystick to move the cursor around to simulate the light gun, but hey, it's still fun. It's a treat to see this get released too. This was the first time it ever got a console port, and to see them add it after release, yeah, kudos to them. If you love 80s games, make sure to play it, as well as the many other arcade games in the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. So Clockwork Aquario is a really interesting entry on this list. It was an arcade game brought back from the dead. It was originally supposed to be released in the arcades, but it never saw an official release. 30 years later, a huge team of passionate people revived the game and finished the game. It just blows my mind. The end result is a really fun arcade game that's easy to pick up. The main gimmick here is being able to pick up and throw your enemies. There are secret bonuses to discover, and it'll take some time for you to maximize those scores. Check it out, it's a lot of fun, especially to experience something that got finished so many years later. If you're curious, I did a full review of the game on the channel. I'll leave a link to that video down below in the description box and the comments down below if you want to check it out. Both Capcom arcade collections are great ways to experience a metric ton of arcade goodness. For today though, I'm going to focus on one really awesome game from the second collection. Three Wonders is actually a collection of 3 fun arcade games in one package. The first game is a platform run-and-gun game called Midnight Wanderers. This reminds me a bit of the Metal Slug games. Lots of bullets, lots of enemies, lots of ways to die and lose a life. That frantic style from those games is here, but what's cool is this came out long before the Metal Slug series was a thing. The second game is called Chariot, and this is a scrolling shooter featuring characters from the previous game. This one is a blast. It's a pretty good shoot 'em up, I really like it. The final game, and a bit of an odd duck, is Don't Pull. It's a puzzle game that's like the Lolo games on the NES or Pengo, where you have to push blocks to crush monsters to advance to the next board. It's a little tricky, but once you get the hang of it, it's fun. Three Wonders really stood out back in the days of the arcade, and it's really nice to be able to play it on the Switch. Now the next entry, I'm going to cheat a little and just group these following games all together. The Darkstalkers games. What a time to be alive, to have access to the legendary Darkstalker games on modern consoles. There's a few ways to play these games on the Switch. A few were included in the Capcom Arcade Second Stadium, I believe 3 games in the series. My preferred method though is via the Capcom Fighting Collection, where just about every arcade release from the Darkstalkers series is included in it. These games are some of my favorite arcade games of all time. The details of the sprite animation blew my mind as a kid, and even as an older adult, it is still impressive to me. The gameplay is ultra smooth too, with crazy over-the-top attacks, and it's just so much faster than other fighting games at the time. Felt like an evolution compared to other arcade games. Here in the Fighting Collection, I'm thankful that I'm able to experience these games at any time I want. And if I'm feeling bold, I can take it online too, and probably lose. But hey, it's all good fun, and I'm so thankful after all these years to have it in one package. Again, what a time to be alive. I talked about Darkstalkers, but if I'm going to talk about some arcade fighting games, I have to talk about Street Fighter. It's a given. Just as excellent as the Capcom Fighting Collection is, make note that the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection is just as good. A massive amount of Street Fighter games in one collection with a load of perks, gallery stuff, online play, etc, etc. My go-to games in this collection are down to the following 2. Street Fighter Alpha 3, the cherry on top of the Alpha series, features a massive roster and refined gameplay. To this day, I think it's one of the best fighting games ever made. It's glorious. When I got this collection, it literally was the first game I went for. The second game was Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, Fight for the Future. In this entry in the Street Fighter 3 series, Capcom got it right the gameplay, a much better roster than the previous Street Fighter 3 versions, and that parry system. It's not an easy game, it will rough you up, but it's a rewarding arcade game, and I'm glad to experience it with many other Street Fighter games in this collection. It's presented well, and again, it has online gameplay too, if you want to duke it out. Just one more fighting game I'm going to talk about, I promise. Look, fighting games were some of my favorite types of arcade games, so it should be no surprise to see quite a few on this list. I'm just going to sneak this next one in. Samurai Shodown II. This entry in the famed series is considered one of the greatest arcade games of all time. The ability to break weapons, parry attacks, and a really well-rounded roster of characters makes this an excellent fighting game to experience. This one can be enjoyed via a few ways on the Switch, via itself as a separate download, either through the SNK published version, or the Arcade Archives version, or through the Samurai Shodown Neo Geo collection. We get a bunch of games from the series, 7 in total. That version would be the one I would recommend, mainly because you get a bunch of games at a good price. G-Darius HD is an excellent way to experience an arcade classic. Now, it does include the console version, but here, for the purposes of the video, I'm going to focus on the arcade versions. Yes, you heard right, arcade versions. See, what's cool here is that this includes multiple versions of the arcade release. The original version had an updated HD version, version 2, which was an updated release in the arcades with new adjustments, and an HD version of that. I love the gameplay in this one. This is a classic Darius formula, but with 3D visuals. One of my favorite mechanics from this game is the capture ball system that allows you to capture enemies and use them against other enemies and bosses. It allows for some strategy. It ends up being pretty darn fun. It's one of my favorite shoot-'em-ups of all time, and it's great to see this have a good release on the Switch. Now a little bit of a bonus entry to top off the list. Cruis'n Blast on the Switch is a console port of the arcade game. Unlike the others on this list, it doesn't end up being nearly a one-to-one port. There's quite a few changes, additional content, cars and such. That's okay though. The arcade gameplay as a whole is still there, and that's what counts. I remember seeing videos online about the arcade version and being impressed with how fun it looked with its over-the-top gameplay. Fast forward to 2021, and I was blown to see that the Switch was getting a console port. It's not the most advanced racing game, but it is fun, and the console version truly captures that arcade racing experience. This one can be had for cheap too, around $20 or so, so if you like arcade racing, you need to own this. I mean, you can race as a dinosaur or a unicorn in this game. How can you not get it? Anyway, while making this video, I soon realized that yeah, there's a lot more arcade goodness I want to talk about. A lot more. So let me know in the comments. You want to see a follow-up video to this in the future? If you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, so you never miss the many videos that go live on the channel each and every week. One final reminder too, don't forget to share what are some of your favorite arcade games for the Switch in the comments down below. I'm looking forward to reading those. Anyway, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.